The name stopped her cold. James Harrison, family law attorney. Rebecca Chun sat in her living room on a rainy Thursday afternoon, laptop balanced on her knees. The kind of searching you do when your life has just come apart at the seams. Divorce lawyers. Seattle. Best rated. And there he was, third listing down, like the universe had a sick sense of humor. She stared at the photo. Longer than she should have. Lincoln High School graduate. University of Washington Law. 12 years specializing in family law. James. The boy who sat in the back of chemistry class and read during lunch. The boy who had picked up her dropped books in the hallway once, handed them back without making her feel stupid, and disappeared before she could think of anything to say. The boy she had noticed, really noticed, but never approached because back then she had been too busy being Rebecca Chen, the girl everyone liked, the girl who smiled at everything and meant none of it. She told herself it was a common last name. Told herself it was probably a different person. Her gut told her otherwise. She was 38 years old and her 15-year marriage was falling apart. Her husband David had been cheating. Multiple times. She'd found out about the first affair 3 years ago. He'd promised it would never happen again. She had believed him, or told herself she had, which wasn't quite the same thing. Yesterday she'd come home early and walked into her own bedroom and found him there with Jessica from his office. She'd driven around Seattle for hours after that, crying, not crying, just driving. She couldn't go back to that apartment, couldn't look at that bed. So she did what she always did when her world broke. She researched, made lists, found solutions. James Harrison's name appeared on every best divorce lawyers in Seattle list she found. She booked an appointment before she could talk herself out of it. Initial consultation. Tomorrow at 2. Her hands were shaking as she filled out the online form. The next morning she changed outfits 3 times. Navy blazer and jeans, finally. Professional but not trying too hard. She pulled her hair back, let it down, pulled it back again. Why are you doing this? She asked herself in the mirror. He's a lawyer. He probably doesn't even remember you. Maybe that was exactly what scared her. She took the elevator to the 14th floor and walked into a small, well-appointed office. Clean lines, comfortable furniture. The receptionist smiled and told her Mr. Harrison would be with her shortly. Rebecca sat with her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles went white. This was real. She was really doing this. Ending a marriage, starting over at 38 with 2 kids and a graphic design career she'd abandoned years ago. Mrs. Chun. She looked up. James Harrison was taller than she remembered, which made sense. 20 years had passed. He wore glasses now, his hair shorter, but she knew him immediately. The way he held himself, slightly reserved, giving her room to breathe. The careful way he looked at her, like he was trying to understand something without crowding it. Please, call me Rebecca. She stood and extended her hand. His handshake was firm and warm. Rebecca, I'm James. Come on back. She followed him down the hallway, her mind racing. Did he recognize her? He'd called her Mrs. Chun. Maybe he didn't remember. Maybe she'd been so invisible back then, despite all the performance, that even someone who'd been in the same classes hadn't really seen her. His office was organized and welcoming. Bookshelves lined with legal texts, a desk with neat stacks of files, 2 comfortable chairs facing each other. He gestured to one and she sat, smoothing her hands over her jeans. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. I know you're probably busy. It's fine. He pulled up her file. So you're looking to file for divorce. The word hit her like a physical blow, even though she'd been the one to seek it out. Yes, 15 years. 2 kids. 10 and 7. He made notes, his expression calm and professional. What's prompting the divorce? God, she'd been dreading that question. He cheated. Multiple times. I found out about the first one 3 years ago. He promised it wouldn't happen again. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. But it did. James looked up. Something in his expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. She looked down at her hands. The worst part is, I think I knew. Deep down. I just didn't want to see it. You're seeing it now, he said quietly. That's what matters. She looked at him, and for just a second she wondered. If he knew. If he remembered. His expression stayed professional. Kind, nothing more. They spent an hour together. He walked her through the process with patience she hadn't expected. Filing the petition, serving David, custody, assets. She listened carefully, took notes on her phone. She'd always been organized. It was how she survived. "He's going to fight me on custody," she said at one point. "I know he will." "Why do you think that?" "Because he knows it's the one thing that'll hurt me most. He doesn't even spend time with them now. But he'll use them to punish me for leaving." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. "We'll fight for what's best for your children," James said firmly. "That's what the court cares about. Not punishment. Not revenge." She nodded, even though she didn't quite believe it yet. When he asked whether she had access to their financial records and she admitted David handled most of it, she watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. When she mentioned that David threw things sometimes, punched walls, had come close to hitting her but never quite crossed that line. His hands curled briefly into fists on the desk before he relaxed them. She noticed. "Do you feel unsafe?" His eyes met hers directly. She hesitated. "Not physically, but he gets—" She searched for the word. "He gets large. We can request a restraining order if you think you need one." "Not yet. I don't want to escalate things." "Not yet. Just promise me you'll call if anything changes." "I promise." At the end of the appointment, she gathered her things and paused at the door. She had to know. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have we met before? You seem familiar." She watched his face carefully. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. And then it was gone, smoothed over by professionalism. "I don't think so. I just have one of those faces." She smiled a little. "Maybe." She left the office and sat in her car in the parking garage for 10 minutes, hands gripping the wheel, the engine off. That was James Harrison. She was almost certain he'd lied. And she was almost certain she understood why. She drove home to the apartment she was going to have to leave, the bed she couldn't sleep in anymore, the life that was crumbling around her. And she thought about his steady voice, his careful questions, the way he'd looked at her when she mentioned David's anger, like he cared, like he actually saw her. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something like hope, small and fragile and very much alive. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca lived in a state of suspension. She was still in the apartment with David, sleeping in the guest room, dodging him in hallways, keeping her face neutral in front of the kids. She told him the morning after her appointment with James, in a conversation so cold it barely registered as human. Standing in their kitchen while the kids were at school, her voice flat and certain. "I want a divorce." David had stared like she'd spoken a foreign language. He'd said it was a mistake. He'd said they could fix it. He'd gotten angry. A glass against the wall, words she'd stopped really hearing years ago, and she'd stood there, shaking on the inside, steady on the outside, and told him her lawyer would be in touch. Since then, Cold War. Polite in front of the children, silent everywhere else. He'd moved into a hotel, which was actually a relief. At least she could sleep. Her second appointment was a Wednesday afternoon. Sarah, James's paralegal, met her in the waiting area. A warm woman in her 50s with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Rebecca, good to see you again. James is just finishing a call." "Coffee?" "Water." "Coffee. Black. No sugar." Sarah smiled. "Just like James." She disappeared into the back. Rebecca sat with her hands in her lap, wondering again why she'd spent 20 minutes choosing which earrings to wear. When James appeared, she followed him back to his office. He had files spread across his desk, David's name visible on several of them. He turned his computer screen toward her without preamble. "I've been digging into your husband's finances. I found some concerning discrepancies. Bank statements. 3 accounts she hadn't known existed, all in David's name. A vacation property in Montana, purchased 2 years ago. Credit card charges at high-end hotels and restaurants, 2 people repeatedly. How much money are we talking about? In the 3 accounts combined? Nearly $200,000. The number didn't land right away. Then it did. $200,000. She'd been buying the kids' clothes at thrift stores. She'd worked from home, barely, because David had said they didn't need her income. She'd made herself smaller and smaller to fit into the life he'd designed. And all that time, she stood up without meaning to, walked to the window, needed to move, needed somewhere for the rage to go that wasn't his face. 15 years. She'd given him 15 years. She'd given up her career, her friends, her sense of who she was. She had made herself disappear for a man who had been lying to her from the beginning. She felt the tears coming and hated herself for it. "I'm sorry. This is so unprofessional." She heard James stand, heard his footsteps cross the office. He appeared beside her with a box of tissues. "You're allowed to be angry. You should be angry." She took the tissues, pressing them to her eyes. "I gave him everything, and he just took and took and took. He doesn't get to take anymore. We're going to make sure of that." She looked up at him. He looked angry too. Not professionally concerned, but genuinely angry on her behalf, the kind of anger that belongs to someone who's chosen a side. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Something flickered across his face. He stepped back, professional distance returning. "Because you deserve kindness, and you haven't been getting it." Sarah knocked before she could respond. David's lawyer was on line 2, calling it urgent. The moment shattered. James took the call. Rebecca sat in the waiting area while he was gone. Sarah brought her water and didn't ask if she was okay, which she appreciated. Some questions didn't have good answers. When James emerged 10 minutes later, he looked grimly satisfied. "David wants to settle." Her heart jumped. "Really?" His lawyer is proposing joint custody and a 60-40 split in David's favor. He watched her face fall. "I told them absolutely not. We have evidence of concealed assets and financial fraud. I made it clear that unless they come back with a real offer, we're taking this to trial." She stood slowly. "And you think he'll back down?" "He's scared. He knows we found the money. He knows what that looks like to a judge." For the first time in weeks, she felt something like power returning to her body. "So what do we do?" James looked at her steadily. "We make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every dollar he tried to steal from you. We take him to court and we win." A slow smile spread across her face. The first real one in months. "Okay, let's do it." Over the following weeks, she saw James 3 more times. Each appointment felt less like a business transaction and more like something she wasn't ready to name. She learned things about him in small increments. He drank his coffee black. He worked late most nights, according to Sarah. He asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. He never made her feel foolish for the choices she'd made, for staying as long as she had. During their 3rd meeting, she brought him coffee, the same brand she'd seen in his office, 2 cups on the way in. Black, no sugar. He looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but you've been working really hard on this." He took the cup. Their fingers brushed briefly and she felt it like an electric charge. He looked away first. "It's my job. It's more than that. I've had lawyers before. They never cared like you do." He looked uncomfortable with that. "Your case matters. So do a lot of cases. But Sarah told me you've been here until 10 some nights." He shot a glance toward the hallway. "Sarah talks too much. She cares about you. She's been with me since I opened the practice. She's basically family." They worked through more financial documents sitting side by side at his desk. She became acutely aware of how close they were. Close enough to smell his cologne, something clean and understated. Close enough that when he pointed to something on the screen, his hand was inches from hers. "I still feel like I know you from somewhere," she said suddenly. He went very still. "Lincoln High, chemistry class. You sat in the back." She watched his face. "You were always reading during lunch. You helped me pick up my books once when I dropped them." A long silence. "You remember that?" "I remember you. I just didn't connect it until now." She paused. "Why didn't you say anything when I came to your office?" "Because you came to me for help, not to reconnect with some guy from high school you barely knew." "I knew you," she said softly. "I noticed you. That's different from not knowing you. They were very close now, both of them having drifted without meaning to. You were that girl, he said quietly. But you were also more than that. I could tell. Her breath caught. How could you tell? Because I was watching. And I saw the moments when you let the performance slip. When you thought no one was looking. She stared at him. Why didn't you say anything back then? He stood, putting space between them. Because you were Rebecca Chin. And I was nobody. That's not true. Rebecca, we should focus on your case. Right? Of course. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. He ran a hand through his hair. It's just, this is complicated enough without. Without what? He looked at her. Without me wanting things I can't have. Her heart was pounding. What things? His phone rang before he could answer. The moment shattered again, cleanly, like it had been waiting for an excuse. She sat there watching him take the call and wondered what he'd been about to say. She was almost certain she already knew. The custody hearing was on a Tuesday morning in late November. Rebecca met James outside the courthouse at 8. She'd barely slept. Had run through every scenario where she might say the wrong thing and lose her children. James took one look at her. You're going to be fine. What if I mess up? You won't. And even if you do, I'll be right there. He was in a dark suit. She was in a gray dress that felt like armor and made her feel like a costume. They walked in together. David was already there with his lawyer, Peterson. He looked angry. Good. Angry was better than the cold, dismissive look she'd grown so accustomed to that she'd stopped flinching at it. Judge Morrison, 60s, sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, called the court to order. Peterson called David first. Rebecca sat there listening to her husband of 15 years lie about who he was. He painted himself as a devoted father, a tireless provider. He expressed concern about her stability, her distance from the kids, her possibly fragile mental state. Every word was a knife. Every lie was another small betrayal in a long chain of them. She felt James's hand briefly touch her arm under the table. A small thing. It steadied her completely. Then it was her turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through water, everything slow and heavy and surreal. But when she sat down and found James's eyes across the courtroom, something settled inside her. He started easy. Her relationship with the kids, their daily routines, what they loved, what they struggled with. She talked about helping Emma with math homework every night, the two of them laughing more than learning, Rebecca useless at algebra but always there. About driving Max to soccer 3 times a week, rain or shine. About making dinner together most evenings. The kids elbow deep in whatever recipe they'd chosen. Flour on everything. She painted a picture of her life with her children. The real one. Mrs. Chun, James said, his voice even. Can you tell the court about your husband's involvement with your children over the past year? She looked at David. His jaw was tight. He works late most nights. When he's home, he's usually on his phone or watching TV. He's missed the last 4 parent-teacher conferences. He forgot Emma's birthday last year. I had to remind him to call her. Peterson objected. Judge Morrison overruled. She continued. Weekend after weekend when David played golf while she took the kids to the park. School events where she was the only parent. Bedtimes and sick days and homework crises she'd handled alone. Every doctor's appointment. Every nightmare. It wasn't angry testimony. It was just true. And truth had a texture to it that performance never did. Peterson tried to rattle her on cross-examination. He asked about her failures. Moments of lost patience. Days she'd been overwhelmed. The times she'd needed help. I'm not perfect, she said. But I'm there. Every day. I'm present for my children. That's what matters. When she stepped down, she felt lighter. Like she had finally said something true in a world that had been built of lies for too long. Outside the courtroom afterward, she collapsed onto a bench. James sat beside her. How did I do? You were perfect. Honest and real and clearly devoted to your children. She looked at him. Thank you. For everything. We're not done yet. I know. Her phone rang. David's name on the screen. Don't answer it. James's voice was immediate, firm. She answered anyway. Some part of her needed to hear it. His voice was loud, venomous. Everything she'd known it would be. You think you're going to take my kids? My money? I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you have nothing. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. That's harassment. James was already reaching for his phone. We're filing for a restraining order. Today. James. No. This ends now. The fierceness in his voice stopped her. You're not going to be threatened anymore. She looked at him. This quiet boy from high school grown into someone formidable, someone who apparently took her safety personally. And she said quietly, "Why do you care so much?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost carefully, like he was setting something down he'd been carrying a long time, "Because I've cared about you since I was 17, Rebecca. And seeing you hurt makes me want to burn the world down." The admission hung between them. "You had a crush on me?" she said softly. "I had more than a crush on you. I was completely in love with you for 2 years. And you never knew I existed." "That's not true. I noticed you. You smiled at everyone. Not the way I wanted to smile at you. But I was too scared." She paused. "Too busy pretending to be someone I thought people wanted." "And now?" he asked. "Now I don't know who I am. But I'm trying to figure it out." They sat on that courthouse bench, the truth finally spoken, the city moving around them. "We should file that restraining order," she said eventually. "Yeah," he agreed. Neither of them moved for another minute. Then they went inside. A week later, Judge Morrison's decision came through. Primary custody to Rebecca. David got every other weekend and 1 night a week. When James called to tell her, she burst into tears. "We did it." "You did it," he corrected. "You fought for them, and you won. Can I come by the office? I want to celebrate." She showed up an hour later with wine and 2 glasses. Sarah took one look at her, smiled like someone who had seen this coming from the beginning, and disappeared. They sat in James's office, the case files pushed aside, and talked for a long time. About the case, about what came next, about the life she was building from scratch. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been with David since I was 22. I don't even know who I am without him." "You're Rebecca. You're strong. You're a good mother. You're talented. You deserve better than what you had." She looked at him across the desk. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. When this is over, when I'm ready, would you want to have dinner with me? Not as my lawyer. As you." He didn't hesitate. "Yes. Obviously yes." She smiled. "Good." Then she left before she could do something she wasn't ready for. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. David signed without contest, 50-50 split of all assets, including the hidden money. Primary custody to Rebecca. She sat in her new apartment, the one she'd rented for her and the kids, and she cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming sensation of being able to breathe again. Then she called James. "I'm divorced. How do you feel?" She thought about it. Free. Terrified. Free. He laughed softly. "That sounds about right." "The dinner offer still stands," she said. "If you're interested." "I'm interested." They met the following Saturday at a cafe near the waterfront. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been since she was a teenager. The good kind, the kind that meant something. He was already there when she arrived, sitting by the window. When he saw her, he smiled. They talked for 2 hours. About high school. About the people they'd been and the people they'd become. About her kids, his practice, the strange geometry of life that had brought them to this particular table. "I'm not the girl you remember from high school," she said at one point. "I know. You're better. I'm a mess. You're human. There's a difference." She looked at him. "Can I be honest with you?" "Always. I'm not ready for a relationship. Not yet. I need time to figure out who I am. To heal. To just be Rebecca for a while." "I understand. But I like you. A lot. And I think maybe, when I'm ready, if you're still interested." "I'll be interested." Certain, simple, no performance in it. "I've been interested for 20 years. I can wait a little longer." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for being patient with me. Take all the time you need." 6 months passed. 6 months of learning who she was outside of being David's wife. She rebuilt her graphic design business slowly. Freelance projects, rediscovered creativity, work that felt like hers again. She focused on her kids, on giving them stability and love and security. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. She saw James every couple of weeks. Coffee, sometimes lunch. He helped her with legal paperwork for the business. She showed him the designs she was working on. They were careful with each other, thoughtful, both of them aware that rushing would be a mistake. But the feelings were there, growing stronger every time. One evening, 9 months after her divorce was finalized, she called him. "Are you busy?" "Never too busy for you. Can you come over? I want to show you something." He arrived 20 minutes later. She led him to her home office, where she'd been working all week. A painting covered most of one wall. Abstract, full of blues and greens and gold. "I'm calling it starting over," she said, "because that's what I'm doing." He studied it quietly, really looked at it. "It's beautiful." She turned to face him. "I'm building a life that's mine, not David's, not anyone else's. Mine." A pause. "I'm ready now." "Ready for what?" "For this. For us. If you still want it." His eyes searched her face. "Are you sure? I've spent 9 months figuring out who I am. And part of who I am is someone who wants to be with you." A slow smile. "I still want it. I've never stopped wanting it." "Then kiss me." He did. Soft and careful at first, then deeper, like something that had been waiting 20 years to happen was finally allowed to be real. When they pulled apart, she was grinning. Was it worth the wait? Absolutely. They built something real over the next year. Slow, careful, deliberate, conscious of her kids, conscious of each other. Emma and Max liked him, which mattered more than anything. He was patient with them, kind, never trying to replace their father, but finding his own place in their world. There were hard days. Days when her anxiety about relationships spiked and she pulled away and had to consciously choose to come back. Days when he second-guessed himself, wondered if he was doing this right. But they talked through those moments. They chose each other over and over, which turned out to be the only thing that actually worked. 18 months after that first kiss, James asked her to marry him. A Saturday morning in her living room. Kids at David's for the weekend. She was working on a design project, he was reading briefs. Ordinary and comfortable and completely real. He closed his laptop and got down on one knee right there on her living room floor. "Rebecca Chin," he said, "I've loved you since I was 17 years old. I loved the girl in chemistry class who smiled at everyone. I loved the woman who walked into my office broken and determined to fight for herself. And I love the woman you are now, building this beautiful life, figuring out who she is. Will you marry me?" She was crying before he finished. "Yes, of course yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him up and kissed him. "I love you. I should have said it before. I love you." "I know," he said, smiling. "But it's nice to hear." They married the following spring. Small ceremony, close family, the people who'd actually been there. Emma and Max stood with them, part of the promise. Her parents flew in from Portland. His from Arizona. When she said her vows, she looked at this man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay, and she felt grateful for every painful step that had led her to this room. "I promise to be honest with you," she said. "To be myself, not a performance. To choose you every day, even when it's hard. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You reminded me that I was worth fighting for. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life showing you what it means to be loved by someone who's finally learned to love herself." His vows were quieter, steadier, but no less true. "I promise to see you, always. The Rebecca who performs and the Rebecca who hides and the Rebecca who creates and the Rebecca who struggles. All of you. I promise to fight for us the way I fought for your case, with everything I have. You walked into my office 20 years after I fell in love with you, and you gave me a second chance at something I thought I'd lost. I'm never letting go." 3 years later, they live in a house in Ballard. Emma is 13 now, Max is 10. They're doing well, complicated and growing and alive in ways that can only happen when the adults in a room are finally telling the truth. David is still in their lives, more present than he used to be. Rebecca is grateful for that without being sentimental about it. Her design business is thriving. James's practice is busier than ever. He still works too late sometimes, still cares too much about his clients. But he comes home. They have dinner together. It's real. One evening she's painting in her studio when he comes home. He wraps his arms around her from behind and kisses her neck, looking over her shoulder at the canvas. What are you working on? Something for the gallery show next month. It's beautiful. She turns in his arms. I'm happy. Is that weird to say? Why would it be weird? Because 3 years ago I was sitting in a lawyer's office thinking my life was over. And now we're here. He kisses her softly. Later that night, after the kids are in bed, they sit on the back porch with wine. Seattle summer sky doing that thing where it stays light until almost 10. Can I tell you something? Always. That first day, in your office, when you said you didn't recognize me, he smiles. Yeah, I knew you were lying. I could tell. How? Because I knew you, even after 20 years. I recognized something in you. The boy who sat in the back and noticed things. He's quiet for a moment. I was terrified you'd think it was weird. Or unprofessional. It was a little weird, she admits. But also kind of perfect. Perfect. You'd been seeing me my whole life. Even when I couldn't see myself. She squeezes his hand. That matters. You see yourself now, he says. I'm getting there. A small smile. With some help. You did it yourself, Rebecca. I just held up the mirror. She leans her head against his shoulder and watches the light fade over the rooftops. She thinks about second chances. About the boy she'd noticed but never talked to, who had grown into the man who helped her rebuild her life. About how sometimes the things you need most have been there all along, patient and quiet, waiting for you to be ready to see them. I love you, she says. I love you too. The city hums around them. The light finally fades. She feels complete. Not because of him, not because of anyone else, but because she finally knows who she is. And the woman she is? She's someone who chose to fight for herself. Who chose to start over. Who chose to build something real. The woman she is has finally come home.